Billy. You will have seen him before in my Halloween tutorials. To start this transformation, I have applied a vinyl bald cap. If you've never used a bald cap before, I have a tutorial on how to apply one. If you click on the top right hand of this video, it will take you to that tutorial and then you can come back and follow along the rest of the process for the White Walker. The next step in this transformation is to apply some wax to the eyebrows. The purpose of using wax in the brows is to disguise the hairs. It will allow them to lay completely flat against the skin, so you can apply makeup over the top and completely disguise them. This is great for many looks. And although there are many techniques such as Elmer's glue and Pros-Aide, for me, wax is one of my favourites because you can really build it up till you can no longer see the hairs. I like to use a metal spatula and apply the wax in the same direction that the hair grows. And then I like to use a eyebrow comb to brush that through the hair so it really coats kind of both sides of the hairs at the same time, but you're not changing the direction of the hair. And at the same time as combing it through the hairs, you're also flattening them. And this gives the neatest, most even finish. And then I go over them one more time with a spatula to make sure they're nice and flat and that there's no brush stroke marks. At this stage you would then use a sealer to seal the brows in place, and then you could cover it with makeup. I'm not going to seal them at this stage because I want to build up the very front of the brow to create a bit more of a sinister, heavy appearance. So I'm very roughly building this up in layers until I'm happy with how heavy the brow is looking at the front, but I'm not going to be too concerned about getting it too neat because the overall skin finish of the White Walker is textured. I'm using a very small amount of Vaseline just to flatten some of the edges, but as you can see we've got texture and heaviness to the brow, which is perfect. So now I'm going to use the Krylon sealant to go in and apply this with a cotton bud so that it seals the surface so I can work over the top and not disturb the wax. I've used the wax technique in a few of my videos. If you check out my Gomorrah makeup tutorial, you'll see how I get more of a smooth finish. Next up, I'm going in with some of the Pro Shield Barrier Foam by Krylon. This is a great product for protecting the skin from harsher influences such as FX makeup. We're going to be using a hybrid paint which is really great at sticking to the skin, and as Billy won't be leaving the makeup on, we want something that's going to help to remove the paint easier. To create the deep crevices that are distinct to the White Walker's face, I'm going to be using a product called Dermaflage. Now this has been designed as a topical silicone based filler, so it's not something that you would inject into the skin. Instead it would be something that you would wear on a daily basis to conceal any deep scars or recesses on the skin. The medical grade silicone actually comes in different skin tone colours, and it comes with a silicone pad that has a skin print on it. You would then press this onto the silicone while it's wet and it would take on the print of skin so it looks super natural and you can't see it sitting on the skin. It lasts all day, it's waterproof, and at the end of the day you just peel it off. So instead of using it for its intended purpose, I thought it would be a really great way to create those really distinctive lines that you can see on the White Walker's face. I'm using a reference image off of Google to get an idea of the placement for the lines, and it's a bit like decorating a cake. As I go along, I'm filling in certain areas and building up different aspects of the face so it looks really similar to my reference image. It needs to look semi-symmetrical but not completely symmetrical. So as you can see, I've left around the underneath of the eye area because this area needs to look like it's slightly sunken. And using a black shade around this area is going to help us to really make that look like it's more sunken than it actually is. And here you can see I'm going in and building up around the eye socket so that the silicone sits slightly higher than the actual skin. I'm also building this up on the arch of the eyebrow area and taking this up the forehead. It's going to change the shape of the forehead bone, making it look like it's more prominent in these two areas. I'm using my spatula to smooth out the edges before it sets in place, which is quite quickly. I'm also taking that down from the bottom lip towards the chin. Moving on to the eyes, I'm applying some black gel eyeliner by Inglot. This is number 77 and I'm taking this along the waterline. To darken the lids, I decided to use a face paint because this is so much easier to remove, especially as Billy is a guy and the last thing he wants is something that's super durable and hard to remove. So I'm using black face paint by Superstar and I'm just very roughly blending this out with a fluffy blending brush while it's wet. This does not need to be neat. We're not creating a nice evening smoky eye, we are just creating a nice black face to give that nice deep sunken look. When working on somebody else, it can be quite hard to get to the root of the eyelashes if they tend to crease their eyes, so keep their eyes open but get them to look down when you're applying the makeup. I'm going into this Certified Dynasty palette and I'm taking the shade Emperor, which is a cobalt blue, and I'm applying this over the black on the centre of the eyelids. It's going to be really, really subtle, but it's just going to add that bluey tinge to the skin, which we need. I'm also taking that face paint close to the lash line underneath Billy's eyes, and I'm getting him to keep his eyes closed while I apply it. That stops him from creasing his eyes so much. And then I'm using a cotton bud just to smudge it out. I don't want that black to be too dark all the way down. So before I go in with the hybrid paint, I'm going to be using some alcohol activated paints by Krylon, and I'm going to be using one of my favourite brushes by Delium Tools. This one is a Thomas Surprenant brush. It's the 195 and it's a large stippling brush. Mixing together the cream and the blue shade, we're going to create a nice base over the skin. We don't want it to be too uniform, that's why we're using a stippling brush. The reason for this alcohol activated paint base first is because we have used a silicone product on the skin, which is the Dermaflage. When I created my Yondu tutorial, we actually used a silicone base around the fin on top of the head. I found with the hybrid paint that it took a couple of goes over the silicone because it wanted to kind of separate, but I found it applied better over the silicone when I applied a face paint base. For this look, I'm applying it in washes of colour, so these alcohol activated paints are the best choice as a base for this particular look. Now I've got that down, I'm going to be using the Pro Air hybrid paint. It doesn't contain any water and it contains a blend of water repellent makeup ingredients. If you're looking for something that gives you amazing longevity but is also affordable, then this is the best paint you can get. As I said, this is completely waterproof and it can last up to 3 days. And in case you're wondering, it doesn't leave any staining. If you've seen my Yondu tutorial, then you'll know that Pro Air is the same product that was used on Guardians of the Galaxy. I've layered the shade Vascular twice on the skin, and again I'm still using a stipple motion to do this. Then over the top of that, I'm going to be layering the colour Bone. Be sure to give these bottles a really good shake before you dispense them. I've poured a very small amount of this because a little goes a long way into a glass dapping dish, which I'm dipping my brush into, and then I'm stippling over the top. As you can see, as I start to work it in light washes, it does fade into the blue, but we're going to layer this a couple of times to really start to build up the opacity of the colour. The reason I'm using more of a bluey, icy finish to the skin is because the actual colour grading of the footage has a blue finish to it. I can imagine that the White Walkers themselves would actually probably be more like a white grey tone, so I plan to go quite heavy with the white highlights and the black contouring. And this blue tone will kind of sink back a bit, but it will still be there, creating that kind of icy feel to the White Walker. What I love about the Pro Air paint is that it doesn't need any touch-ups. Once it's on, it does not budge, but don't let that fool you into thinking that this is hard to remove. One of my favourite products is Pro Clean, but it also is easy to remove with something so simple as dish soap. Make sure you work it onto the skin with no water. It will start to break down that paint, which will go slightly milky, and then you can just wipe it away. So now we've layered Bone over Vascular, we have got the desired lightness to the skin. As you can see, it's still kind of mottled in its appearance, but we've still got that blue peering through. So now we're going in with some black face paint, and I'm going to start to work that on either side of all those silicone lines that we've created over the face. I'm laying the colour down with a fine paintbrush so we can be really precise, and then I'm going in with a kind of like a flat duo fibre brush, and I'm using this for the shaded areas. The bristles are at different lengths, which allows you to create line work, almost a bit like cross hatching. And this is great for special effects makeup if you want to create scratches or kind of theatrical wrinkles. I'm going to be using this at the very end of the makeup to finish off the wrinkle work. It's definitely one of my favourite brushes for special effects work. I'm darkening this area on the outer third of the top of the eyebrow. This is between the two silicone mounds that we've created on the forehead. Darkening this area helps to sink it, but it also in turn makes the eyebrow bone and the bone structure on the forehead look more prominent. I'm applying some black eyeshadow on the inside of the silicone around the eyes. Again, this is sinking that area, making it look like the eyes are more set back. And then using a fine liner brush and some black face paint, I'm now creating wrinkles around the eyes. We're also going to extend those wrinkles over the top of the silicone so it looks as though the crow's feet are really intense. And don't be afraid to go quite dark with this because we're going to be working in all the dark shades first, and then we're going to pull all the highlights forward afterwards, which is really going to start to create the shapes. On the cheeks, I'm using the fine liner brush and the black paint to trace around all the trenches that we've created using the silicone. And then I'm softly blending the edges of those with some black eyeshadow. And again, don't be worried if it looks too dark at this stage because we are going to be going in with some white highlights. On the areas that have larger gaps between the two silicone lines, don't fill those completely in with black. Start to use what's left on the bristles to feather the colour out and just keep the darkness to the very edges of the silicone. That's going to create a shadowed appearance. Along the top of the forehead, I'm now going to be creating some horizontal lines, and I'm using a really light hand to do this. Natural wrinkles in the forehead are not always symmetrical, so just allow your hand to be quite fluid when you're doing this and allow for some gaps in between each of the lines. I always like to work on one side of the face first to get a feel for what I'm doing, and then I mimic the same on the opposite side of the face. Now I've got the majority of the black in place, I'm just going along with a tiny bit of black eyeshadow and just filling in some areas that need a little bit of shading rather than black paint. And back to my fine liner brush, I'm creating some more wrinkles on the forehead. You could use silicone in this area like you've done on the bottom half of the face, but the guy that I'm copying from my reference image looks like he could be in his 60s, and the majority of the work is kind of on the bottom half of the face. The actual forehead itself just looks like it's super wrinkly. So I'm going back in with my flat duo fibre brush to create those more theatrical looking wrinkles, which look really effective when you step back and look at the overall face. So the highlights that we've got on the face at the moment have come from the bone shade that we previously used. Now I'm going to go in with a white face paint, and I'm going to use this to emphasise all those areas that I want to pull forward. So I'm applying it with another fine liner brush. I apply the initial colour first and then tap that onto the skin, and I may need to go over different areas a few times until I'm happy with how bright they are. First off, it's better to apply a softer layer, step back, look at it, and then go in and start to highlight the areas that need to come out a little bit more. In particular, you want to start around the eyes because we really want that area to look like it's pulling forward and that the eyes are sinking back. I'm freehanding some highlights across the centre of the nose. Highlighting at the base of the lip will make the area look like it curves round, and I'm also emphasising around the crow's feet. Remember, it's always really important to keep looking at your reference image as your guide. It would be really easy just to go over all the lines that you've not painted black and make those white, but then you really wouldn't get much dimension to the skin. So just take your time, step back and look at your reference image against what you've created and see where you need to go in and highlight. I'm only highlighting certain areas of those silicone lines, I'm not doing the entire length of them. And here I'm using the very tip of the brush to tap over the kind of little squares that I've created to make it look like wrinkles around the eyes. Using the white over the black here, I'm creating more of a gradient to this shadow. I'm also using stipple motions with this small brush to create pinpoint highlights. And you can see it's what really does make such a difference to this look. Now for the hair, I bought this really cheap £7 Wicked Wizard mask from Wilko, which I picked up at Halloween time. When you use small scissors to detach the hair, it comes off in weaves, so I thought this would be a really great cheap alternative to create the White Walker hair. At the back of the head, we're going to start to layer strips of the hair. You won't see the band because once the hair starts to layer over the top, the band will become invisible because it will be underneath. So I apply some spirit gum in a line and allow it to go tacky, and then I press the hair onto the spirit gum and it will stick to the bald cap. This was definitely one of my favourite parts of the whole look. I applied 3 layers across the back, and as we get towards the crown of the head, I don't allow the strip to come too far forward because the White Walker has quite a high hairline, so you don't want the strip to be too visible at the front. At this stage with his hair like this, it reminds me of the character in the original Disney's Beauty and the Beast, the one who tries to put Belle's dad in the asylum. He had that horrible hairline. So here I've cut the hair off the strip, I've applied the spirit gum to the bald cap, and now I'm just gently pushing the very tips of the hair onto the spirit gum and laying it down in the direction that I want the hair to fall, and then tucking it behind Bill's ears. Applying it freehand like this makes it look like it's coming out of the head rather than off of a strip, which makes it look much more realistic. A little tip is not to flatten the hair because you don't want it to glue flat to the head, you want it to have a little bit of lift. At the very top of the head, I'm still applying this in a strip, and then I'm going to start to apply the hair in the same manner that I applied the sides of the hair. So cutting it from the strip, fanning that out, and then pressing the very tips of the strands of the hair onto the glue so it's got a little bit of lift at the root. And you need to look at the shape of the White Walker's hair. He has a very high hairline, has that M shape, so it recedes back on either side of the forehead and then it comes forward again just above the ears. And as you can see, it's really, really effective. I'm now going in with a little bit of Ben Nye's Silver Grey, and this is a really subtle way to kind of dust down the hair. Although the White Walker's hair is white, Once the footage has been colour graded, the hair doesn't look as super white. And against the face paint colour, we do need to just darken it ever so slightly. So I'm just roughly running that through with a fluffy stipple brush. For the beard, I'm doing the same process as I did with the top of the hairline. I've applied spirit gum to the chin, allowed it to go tacky, and then I'm applying some thin layers of the hair onto the spirit gum. Not all of the White Walkers have beards. Some of them have moustaches and beards, some of them just have a beard, which is the same as the reference image that I'm following. Once you've finished laying your beard on, you can then use some scissors just to cut it into shape. For a £7 mask from Wilko, it's pretty impressive. For the lenses, I used the Ice Walker contact lenses from Camo Eyes. Here for the images at the end, I've just photoshopped them the same as they've been CGI'd in the actual Game of Thrones footage.